Well, hello and welcome as we continue our chronological read through of Scripture. When we last left Joseph, he was languishing in prison. He was favored and trusted by the keeper of the jails, but still, it was no place to be. The chief cupbearer, whose dream he had interpreted, had forgotten Joseph after he was restored to the palace of Pharaoh. And it must have looked to Joseph as though he'd be spending the rest of his life there. There really didn't seem to be any way out for him. But of course, God had other plans. It was a whole 2 years later, but God gave Pharaoh two dreams that basically told the same story in different ways. The first dream, there were 7 cows, plump and healthy, and they were devoured by 7 skinny and ugly cows. The second dream was similar. There were 7 ears of corn, not a single stalk. They were swallowed up by 7 ears of corn that sprouted later on that same stalk. Well, Pharaoh was greatly disturbed by the dreams, so he asked his wise men what they meant. No one could interpret them. Finally, the cupbearer remembers Joseph, and he tells Pharaoh of how Joseph had correctly interpreted his dream and the baker's dream. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph and asked him to interpret the dream. As Joseph had done with the baker and the cupbearer, he told Pharaoh that it was not he who would interpret the dream, but God, that God would give Pharaoh his answer. So Pharaoh shared his dreams with Joseph at length. Joseph then revealed the meaning of the dreams to Pharaoh because they told what God was about to do. The 7 good cows represented 7 years of bountiful crops, as did the 7 good ears of corn. The 7 bad ears and the 7 skinny cows represented 7 years of famine that would follow the 7 years of plenty. They would be so bad that they would effectively consume the land. That the dream came twice means that it is fixed. God will do it. So Joseph proceeded to advise Pharaoh to set someone over the land of Egypt, and then also provide for them overseers, and that they should take 1/5 of what was grown in the good years and store it away under Pharaoh's authority for the lean years yet to come. Pharaoh and his servants were pleased with the plan, and they appointed Joseph to be that man, setting him second only to Pharaoh himself. Well, Joseph carried out the plan. He was given a wife by Pharaoh. He had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Just as God had foretold in the dream, there were 7 years of plenty. Those 7 years came and they went, and then a great famine set in. Since Egypt had grain, everyone from everywhere would come to Joseph in Egypt, and they would buy the grain, including eventually Joseph's brothers, the other sons of Jacob. All but Benjamin made the trip because Jacob feared that harm might come to the only son that, at least he thought, remained from Rachel. When Joseph's brothers arrived in Egypt, they had to appear before Joseph to request the grain. They bowed before Joseph, just as the dream so long ago had foretold. They, of course, didn't recognize Joseph. He looked like an Egyptian. He was in a position of extreme authority in Egypt and so on. But Joseph was able to press them and ask them questions. He accused them of being spies. They pleaded that they certainly were not, and they confessed that they were 10 of 12 sons, one of whom remained with their father. So Joseph continued to test them, ultimately saying that if they were going to prove that they weren't spies, they had to bring that youngest brother back to prove their story. And just to make sure they came back, he was going to keep one of them as a prisoner. Well, not realizing that Joseph could understand everything they said, they were talking to each other and basically saying that this was happening because of what they did to Joseph, that God was punishing them. To make matters worse, at least in their eyes, Joseph had his servants put each of the brothers' money back into the sack with their grain. So when they did leave, they discovered, much to their surprise and actually just plain terrified them, that their money was back in their sack. When they told the story to Jacob, when they returned home and told the story to Jacob, he absolutely refused to allow Benjamin to go back to Egypt to get Simeon released. Jacob, it appeared, preferred to sit tight and absorb his losses rather than risk losing even another son. So a time of waiting sets in as Jacob's and his sons have their grain to sustain them at least for a while, and Joseph remains in Egypt, and Simeon remains in Egypt as well. I pray that your reading today edifies you. I look forward to gathering with you again tomorrow as we continue this particular account. May God be with you and bless your day.